All right, I have a great honor to introduce our next speaker. Every science has its innovators, its celebrities, its giants. Ufology is no different. Our next speaker broke the ground for ancient astronaut research, and I mean that literally. He was the first, the innovator. In 1968, while he was a managing director of a five-star Swiss hotel, he wrote his first book on the subject, and many of us read it. All right, for you old-timers. How many of you was this the very first book you read on this subject of any kind? It blows my mind because that was it for me. This started my whole collection, okay? All right, Chariots of the Gods, which had become an immediate bestseller in the United States and Germany and later in 38 other countries. Of the more than 3,000 lectures which our keynote speaker has delivered in 25 countries, over 500 of them have been presented in universities. Now, I want you to understand the significance of this. This is a crazy topic. Back in the day, it raised questions that had never been raised before. And universities invited him to come and talk, and they still do. The first time that I met Erich was in 1977 in Chicago, Illinois Institute of Technology. I was going to school as a physics major. This is a school of high technical learning. It is the gigantic nerd school, okay? And they had Erich come there and give a lecture, and I was thrilled to meet him, and I think we got in an argument out in the lobby. I don't remember. Yeah. You wouldn't remember me. I was 100 pounds lighter, and I was 18 years old, so I didn't know. And I had, oh yes, and I had hair. It's true, I've got pictures. All right, he's fluent in 4 languages. He is an avid researcher and compulsive traveler, logging over 100,000 miles of travel a year to remote places all over the planet where he firsthand gathers the information that he needs to examine and research this topic. He's not an armchair researcher, in other words, okay? For his groundbreaking work to further the understanding of mankind, he was awarded an honorary doctorate degree by the University of Bolivia. In 1998, he founded the Archaeology, Astronautics, and SETI Research Association, or the AASRA, which publishes the English journal Legendary Times, reporting about the latest research in the Paleo-SETI field. I like the way that sounds, Paleo-SETI, that's cool. Since it began airing in 2010, he has contributed to the Ancient Aliens show, which wouldn't even exist if it wasn't for you, for God's sakes. The most successful documentary series ever aired on the History Channel. 7 seasons, 100 episodes, still going strong. He has over 200,000 pictures of every mysterious place he has visited in his archives. So don't go to his house and say, hey, can I see the family album? You're going to be there a while. He's published 39 books concerning the visit of ETs in the deep past of mankind, and he makes it absolutely clear this planet was visited by ETs in the past. Our Stone Age ancestors looked at these visitors as the gods, which created the original mythologies and religions. He is the shoulder upon which all other ancient alien researchers must stand. Please join me in welcoming Erich Von Daniken.
Thank you. You are a professional. Okay. So, jetzt hoffe ich, yes, Maria, das alles riesig ist. Ich hoffe, die Blätter sind in richtiger Reihenfolge. So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not an extraterrestrial, I'm from Switzerland. And this man next to me here is my secretary. His name is Ramon. He works for me since more than 10 years. I was prepared to have 2 speeches here in this Ozark Mountains. And this is the second speech. But this audience is completely different than the ones on the first speak. They are probably 100 persons who were at the first speech, that's the second speech. That's why I asked you for your permission. I will bring a few repetitions out of the first speech because you need it. Okay. So, I start with the Bible because every one of you can control it. Everyone has a Bible at home. And there at the end of the Bible, there is a story of a prophet with the name of Ezekiel. One has to know in advance, Ezekiel by profession, he was a high priest at the Temple of Jerusalem. All this took place roughly 3,000 years from now. And in his time, Jerusalem was captured by the Babylonians. The high society of the Jewish community, and Ezekiel belonged to the high society as a high priest, was captured, and they were brought as slaves to a place where there was a river. The river was called Chebar, the river of Chebar. So Ezekiel was there with many others, and of a sudden something happened. Here, he and the other slaves hear a noise up there in the clouds, and they all look up there. Now I first show you 5 pictures out of an old Bible, 150 years old, just to give you an impression what our forefathers had in mind when they read Ezekiel. And then I explain you with what meanings and what professionals we made the new modern interpretation. And finally, you will see a computer animation concerning Ezekiel, a computer animation that was just buffing. You will realize it. So he's there with the other slaves on the river of Chebar, and they hear a noise. They all look up there. They see an object which is coming down. They have no idea what the object is. Do not forget, at that time, there were no words for technology. Ezekiel could never say a spaceship lands or a space shuttle. He has no idea what it is. Now he himself, by professional, is a high priest, so he believes, of course, it must be God, the Almighty God. So all of them fell on the ground, including Ezekiel. He, as a high priest, he feels it's up to me to say grace and thank you to the Lord. And as the first one, he stands up. And he describes this whole thing here as the splendorness of the highest. By the way, I know the original Ezekiel in the Hebrew language. And in the Hebrew language, in the whole Ezekiel text, the word God never appears. When I read my German translation or your English translation, you read the highest or a splendorness of God. But in the original, the word God never appears. So he says, the splendorness of the highest. Ezekiel stands on his feet, and he starts to describe what it is. And he realizes that this is not God. The whole thing here is the splendorness of the highest. The whole thing. Then he writes, just on top of it, there was something glittering all around, and in the center was something like a throne. And of this, what looked like a throne, somewhere was sitting in glittering clothes, looking like a human. Under this throne, he sees 4 living creatures. And he realizes these creatures have all wings. And when the wings moved, they made a terrible noise. Under the wings, he realized that there are wheels. And now he is completely shocked. Wheels of his time can go forward and backward. But the wheels which he sees here, they can not only go forward and backward, at the same time, they go right and left. So you have a wheel which goes forward, backward, right and left, and all without a steering movement. When you're sitting on your car and you drive and you turn your wheels turn so. It's a steering movement. Ezekiel's wheel goes in any direction without ever making a movement. This confuses him completely. He writes 4 times about this wheel. Under the wheel, he realized there were legs, and he clearly says the legs were striped and sparkling like metal. In his time, there were metal. 30 years ago, roughly, I had a secret speech. Secret because we all made an agreement that nobody goes to public. A secret speech at the highest level at NASA, here, your space agency. And on this secret speech, I was also speaking about Ezekiel. And later we had a dinner together, and the chief of the construction section, an ex-German, his name was Joe Blumrich, came to me and said, Mr. Von Daniken, that was very interesting. But in the Bible, you will never find technology. In the Bible, these are visions, these are dreams, these are all kinds of things, but certainly not technology. And he said, anyhow, he was grateful. I was the first one who brought him up to Ezekiel. He never read Ezekiel in the Bible. So that's what he wants to do now. And he started to read Ezekiel. And phrase by phrase, he was more fascinated. This was before the moon landing. And they said, before the moon landing, and they said, what Ezekiel is doing here, we can reconstruct with our methods, with our meanings. Then a few other scientists from NASA came to the office of Joe Blumrich and said, what are you doing with the Bible here? They said, look at Ezekiel, this is incredible. We can reconstruct what he did, phrase by phrase. Nothing was left behind it. And finally, they wanted to find out what was this thing, what he said, the splendorness of the highest, the wheels which can go in every direction, the wings, the noise, what was this all? And this here